Photographs allow us to capture a moment in time that we can never get back. Some photographs, however, remind us of the harsh realities of our world. So today, here at Unexplained Mysteries, we'll be taking a look at historical photographs. Beck Weathers, the frozen man of Mount Everest. In May of 1996, the worst ever disaster struck on the highest mountain in the world, Everest. High above the clouds in the Mahalanga Himal subrange of the Himalayas, a group of climbers was attempting to summit the behemoth mountain, but their goal was out of reach. Documented in Jon Krakauer's best-selling book, Into Thin Air, the fate of the climbers led by experienced mountaineer Rob Hall is now widely known. 8 climbers lost their lives on that expedition, but the lesser-known Beck Weathers survived. When Weathers was barely 2,000 feet from summiting the mountain, he began to go blind from the effects of ultraviolet light and high altitude. Rob Hall told Weathers to wait at the so-called balcony point while Hall went ahead with the other clients to the summit, at which point he would return to collect Weathers and safely descend to Camp 4 together. Hall and the other 7 climbers would never return. Weathers was nearly blind and quickly succumbing to the harsh low-oxygen environment. He knew he had to descend as soon as possible if he were to survive. As he began his climb down, a massive blizzard hit, and Weathers was forced to take shelter. This threadbare lean-to may have saved Weathers from near fate, but his hands and face were exposed to the elements, and his skin quickly began to freeze. By some miracle, Weathers was able to survive the storm and, nearly blind, walked entirely of his own volition and strength back down to Camp 4 once the storm cleared. His fellow climbers described his face and hands as looking like porcelain, and they thought that the slightest touch would make his skin shatter like glass. The highest ever medical evacuation by helicopter brought Weathers down to base camp, where he was quickly transported to a local hospital. Doctors were convinced that Weathers would not survive such severe frostbite, and tried their best to make what they thought were his final moments more comfortable. But Weathers pulled through, and upon transport home to Texas in the US, his nose, hands, and arms up to his elbows were amputated. His nose was eventually reconstructed using tissue from his ears and cheeks. Like his fellow climber, Jon Krakauer, Beck Weathers went on to write and publish a book in the year 2000 about his experience entitled Left for Dead, My Journey Home from Everest. He continues to work as a pathologist and motivational speaker. While his complete recovery is undoubtedly miraculous, Weathers will always be known as the frozen man of Mount Everest. Robert Landsberg's photographs of Mount St. Helens. Looming over the Pacific Northwest region in Washington state sits the majestic stratovolcano of Mount St. Helens. The volcano is part of the ever-active Pacific Ring of Fire and remains one of the few active volcanoes near areas of dense human population. It has been a beacon for hikers, environmentalists, and nature enthusiasts alike, but its majesty held a particular allure for amateur photographer Robert Emerson Landsberg. Landsberg had been consistently visiting the volcano since it first started steaming following a moderate earthquake in March of 1980. The ever-changing landscape of the evolving and volatile volcano entranced Landsberg, and he spent much of his time photographing the geologic event. But, like most of the population, he never really understood the possibility of a true eruption. On May 18, 1980, Landsberg was once again indulging his photography hobby near the base of the mountain when all hell broke loose. The mountain exploded, blowing a large crater in the north side of the face of the mountain, and transformed the surrounding terrain into what looked like a post-nuclear moonscape. Ranking a 5 on the Volcanic Explosivity Index, the eruption was the most powerful and ecologically devastating eruption in North American history. Millions of animals were massacred, and the local flora and fauna were decimated for years to come. As the eruption continued, Landsberg knew his time was coming to an end. Instead of packing up his equipment, he remained on the mountain and took some of the most detailed photos of a volcanic eruption in modern scientific history. As the pyroclastic flow of ash, gas, and heat exceeding 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit raced towards him, he finally packed away his camera into his backpack and laid down on top of the pack in an effort to shield it from destruction. His body created a dome of protection around the landmark photos, but sadly at the cost of his life. Weeks after the eruption, disaster relief crews found his disintegrated body under mountains of ash and rubble. Miraculously, the camera and film remained completely intact, and the scientific community went on to develop the film, revealing the photographs and giving them insight into the eruption previously thought not only unattainable, but impossible to document. The prayer of the doomed Apollo 1 astronauts. One would be hard-pressed to find someone not aware of the miraculous spaceflight mission of Apollo 11 that put humanity on the moon for the very first time. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin have gone down in human history as the first men on the moon and launching humanity into an entirely new epoch of civilization. But before Apollo 11, 10 other unsuccessful missions laid the foundation to the stars. The very first Apollo mission, aptly named Apollo 1, consisted of NASA test pilots Roger Chaffee, Virgil Gus Grissom, and Ed White. The trio of astronauts were never tasked with going to the moon, but rather they helped to develop the space capsules, rockets, spacesuits, and equipment that would eventually carry mankind to the moon. On January 27, 1967, Grissom, Chaffee, and White were scheduled to run a very basic simulation test of the Apollo capsule prior to an official launch 25 days later. As test pilots, they were required to be rigorous in their safety audits of the provided astronautical suits and equipment, and all three men had expressed concerns to NASA engineers about the inclusion of highly flammable materials like nylon and Velcro within the Apollo capsule. Their queries went overlooked and unmentioned by NASA High Command. To vent their frustration, the three pilots took a silly picture that depicted them praying to a model of the Apollo capsule, their hands clasped in mock prayer. They presented it to their superiors as a half-joke, half-serious call for concern. Again, their fears were discredited. As they were strapped into the capsule on that sunny January day in Cape Canaveral, Mission Control in Houston was ready to begin the simulation test. The astronauts were fully geared up and sealed into the space transport, and the mock countdown began. All of a sudden, a spark of flame and smoke became visible on mission control cameras. In the pure oxygen environment of the capsule, the small spark quickly became an inferno. The screams and cries for help from the trio locked inside echoed throughout Cape Canaveral and NASA Mission Control as the flight engineers watched and listened helplessly as the men were consumed by an entirely preventable firestorm. Following their deaths, NASA overhauled the entire design of the capsule and ensured that only non-flammable materials were used in all aspects of construction. That one-time silly picture of the doomed inaugural Apollo astronauts now serves as a grim reminder to always listen when any kind of concern is expressed. But what do you make of these discoveries? Be sure to let us know your thoughts in the comment section below and help us by growing this community while working to solve these unexplained mysteries. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos.